RC gas tanks used to all be pretty much the same, but there's a new guy on the block. And these folks had a better idea when it comes to getting fuel out of the tank. Getting a consistent flow of fuel out of a tank while we're throwing a plane all over the sky used to be a problem, but not for these guys. First thing you notice is that there's no flexible tubing inside of the tank. We still have a clunk weight, but that's now rotating on a center shaft. And that tube is what brings the fuel out. And there's no rubber plug here. This is machined aluminum with 2 O-ring seals. It seems most of the people that don't trust this rotary system have never used one of these tanks. And as it turns out, this rotary system is probably the toughest thing on this whole tank. But first, remember this machine plug? This is a really good idea, but they've made it even better. Unlike the old rubber plugs that put pressure outwards to try and seal, these guys use an aluminum ring that captures the plug, and there's no pressure on the tank itself to try and split it. If you've ever had a split tank dump a bunch of fuel into an airplane, you'll really appreciate this. And above the fuel outfitting are the 2 nipples. The top one's for venting, and that's open. The bottom one is for pressure, and you have to drill that if you want to open it up. I did drill this open and use that for filling the tank, but if you don't want to, this keeps it perfectly sealed. Here you can see that the octagon shape of the tank means that the fuel pickup is always going to be right in the back corner of the tank where the fuel is the deepest and the foam is the least likely to be. And this clunk doesn't bounce around or get jammed forward on a hard landing or a crash. Each end of the rotating sleeve has a pair of these high-tech O-rings in it backed up by a stainless steel washer. The O-ring material was developed by NASA and has a working life of 25 to 30 years. That means there's nothing inside this tank that you're going to have to do anything with for 25 or 30 years. I used to hope for a whole season out of a tank before, but this is way better. After the fuel comes up the clunk into the main sleeve, it passes through this array of holes into the outlet line. These holes are small, but there's a bunch of them, so there's plenty of room for fuel to come out of this tank consistently. I don't know of anything flying that can use fuel faster than they can get it out through these holes. The only access to the fuselage on my pits is from the underside, so I had to put the tank in sort of upside down while I was installing it. That octagon shape let me tape the vent line around the top of the tank where it wouldn't get squished when I put it in or by the straps that I used to hold the tank down. I have flown this plane several times since installing this tank, and so far it hasn't moved a bit. You can see here the black witness line I made that'll tell me if the tank does move. The biggest change with this plane since adding the RotoFlow tank is that the engine's running way richer. Just running it in the yard without the cowl, I've already turned the screws in about 1/8 of a turn each. Now this is the first day at the field with it, and we've already leaned it out a little bit more. And when we get it in the air, we're going to see that it still needs to be leaned out some. But I've got it to where it'll fly. Now we're going to sneak up on the right settings. Even running this rich, the DLE-60 twin still got plenty of power for me to do my snap roll on takeoff. It surprised the cameraman, and it was a little more open than it usually is, but it'll get better as we lean the motor out. It still burbles a little bit going from idle into full speed, but it's getting better every time, and we're going to continue tweaking this until it gets just right. The point of all this is that before I put this tank in, this motor was running lean. The only line that I changed in the plane was the vent line because I could make it shorter, and I put a new one of those in. But all the delivery lines remained the same crab trap, and it went completely rich. During these early flights, I did try and throw it around a little bit and get it in positions where the RPM used to change before with the old tank. And even some rolls and flips like this, it stayed the same. I never heard anything where I was trying to go lean. So, am I happy with this RotoFlow tank in my pits? You bet I am. I used to be able to hear a little RPM change when I rolled this plane on its back, but that's gone. I also used to hear the RPM change a little bit when I was coming out of a Lamtrabach or a tumble. It seemed like it sagged a little bit and then it'd come back, but now with the RotoFlow tank in there, it just stays steady all the way through. What most amazes me is how rich this plane went just putting this tank in there. That tells me that we're getting a lot more fuel and we're getting it there consistently, and that should make setting the carburetor a lot easier. And yes, I think I'm going to have to put these tanks in all of my bigger planes anyway. So if you're looking for a tank that's more consistent and very rugged, you might want to take a look at the RotoFlow tanks. Because of how they're installed and made, these really are install it and forget it kind of tanks.